Today, we're going to learn about triangulations. Hi, and welcome to Quilt Meets World, where we have adventures in piecing and joy. I'm Russ. Come on into my sewing room. So, in recent videos, I have talked how I like to use triangulations to make my half square triangles. It's a significantly simpler method for me, and it gives me accurate results. And I've had many people ask me, "Hey, what is triangulations? And could you do a tutorial?" So I've decided that I would try to give it a go. So, Triangulations is a piece of software from Bear Paw Productions. I use the word software pretty loosely because what it really is a PDF document, and you can go through the PDF and decide which pages you want to print, and on each page is a set of half square triangles. They are similar to triangles on a roll, except you get to print exactly what you need. And if you need bigger, you've got them there and you just print them. And it prints it onto a grid like this. Yeah, I did say print. If you don't have a way to print, then you probably don't want to invest in it because buying a printer, buying something to print from the printer, that can be a little pricey. But if you already have a setup, I know a lot of people do, then this might be what you're looking for. I do have a lappity top that I print everything from, so it works for me, and it gives that I've had for gee, 16, 17 years now, actual use in this day and age of everything being digital. I also print out my digital downloads for patterns so that I can have physical copies of it. I still am a person. So a lot of you, this probably work. Uh, you can use standard printer paper, but standard printer paper is a huge range of paper styles. My standard printer paper is fairly thick. You see, it's kind of holding its shape and everything. So I would not recommend printing on thick printer paper. You can get down to, I guess, thinner printer papers. So as you see, it kind of holds its shape, but it doesn't. This is probably what most people consider as standard printer paper. It's fairly thin, but you can still see it's white and everything. What I like to use is newsprint. Newsprint is extremely thin. It's difficult to hold up and everything, and it tears beautifully because at the end you want to tear everything. Um, People concerned about the idea of using their fabric tools with paper. It might have a little bit of impact, but we need to be changing our rotary blades very much more often than we are currently doing. So I don't really see much of a impact on my rotary blade. Definitely would not use my fabric scissors in any form. Uh, the software triangulations, it will make half square triangles as small as a half an inch. Those are really tiny. Insane enough to do that, and it goes as large as 7.5 inches. It can't go any larger because the size of your paper is what it's limited on. And they don't have any sizes for anything larger for larger pieces of paper. They are designed for 8.5 by 11 paper. I'm not sure how this works on A4 paper. Uh, or, some people have the option of that can take letter, legal, ledger, the larger sizes, A4, A3, A2. Yeah, they get bigger that way. Yeah, I do know a little bit about paper. So basically, if you're trying to do paper bigger than that, uh, I don't know what kind of suggestion that I would give. Probably traditional because you're already looking at a large block. You probably have enough wiggle room to make your bigger squares more accurate that way. But when you're talking like really tiny squares, especially when you want something that'll help give you a more accurate piecing. For me, I don't do much with triangulations above 3-inch finished. Part of it is because as you get, I think it's about 3-inch finished, the number of half square triangles you get from a printed piece of paper is a lot fewer. So just because again, it's a amount of paper, real estate on a piece of paper. Uh, I do call triangulations a cousin of foundation paper piecing, or FPP, as a lot of people call it. You are using paper as your template, but the difference is most everything feels normal whenever you get there. The way that you are putting pieces in, you're not trying to put things around a little wonky. You're not trimming your seam and then adding more seams. So it's it's a cousin. It's there. It gives you stuff, and it gives you the accuracy. That's my favorite. As with all quilting tools, people wonder, is this the right thing for me? And I do know that everybody's brain works different. I have many tools that I have invested in that they seem like a good idea at first. I try it. I don't like the way that it works, and it just sits. Triangulations, thankfully, is not one of those. I have used triangles on a roll in the past, and I liked the way that it all came out. So when I learned that triangulations is kind of a cousin to triangles on a roll, I said, okay, this is something that was good for me. Now, some of you may not have tried triangles on a roll and still don't know if triangles work for you. The good news is I did find a sample page that's out there available to you. I've put a link in the description below. The sample page is at a really odd size. I think it's 1 and 5/8 finished. So most people would not be using 1 and 5/8 finished for their regular projects. So I think that's a good size that they would sample page for. Um, it like don't think that you can't do anything with this. You can take your half square triangles that you have and put them in a pinwheel fashion, make a pinwheel block, and put them in a table runner. Use them to make a friendship star or something. You'll have to cut your center and corner blocks at 1 and 5/8 as well. But there's plenty of things that you can do with half square triangles. And since you know the finished size of your half square triangle is 1 and 5/8, then you can make any pattern as long as everything fit in with this thing. Another thing with triangulations is uh, their patterns come in 1/8 inch increments. So if you have that pattern that needs the 1 and 5/8 or 1 and 7/8 or something like that, you have those. But most people use them in 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or full inch finished pieces. So that's what makes it very convenient. They also have versions in 1/16 of an inch. I haven't had a need to use a 1/16 of an inch version yet. I think if I found a pattern that said that I needed a whole bunch of, I don't know, 1 and 3/16 inch half square triangles, I would probably say this isn't the pattern for me. But it's there if you are developing something that needs something of a weird size. A lot of people use EQ8, Electric Quilt 8 or 7, the previous version. And when you're designing a pattern and you end up coming up with something that's an odd size that they want you to use, and instead of readjusting all the pieces, you might to just say, hey, I'll just weird size. They also have in there quarter square triangles. It's a method to make quarter square triangles. and they do have flying geese in there. So you're not just paying for the option to print the half square triangles that you're looking for. You are paying for the ability to do flying geese and I said quarter square triangles. Uh, I haven't used the flying geese all the way yet. It took me a while to figure out what was going on when I tried it the first time, and I just wasn't happy with the results. But now that I've had more experience with the way that the software is written and how everything is going, because I got the experience with the quarter square triangles, that is where everything kind of solidified itself. Is once I used the quarter square triangles templates, then I said, "Oh, now I understand what's going on. This is how the house square the flying geese work." So that's how I did it. So there is a lot of great things about it. Um, Bigger problem is it makes you have to think. Uh, when you get a pattern, it'll say, cut 4 3-inch squares for your half square triangles. They may or may not be already oversized squares, depending on what your finish size is. So you're not going to want to cut 4 individual squares. You're going to want to cut one larger square that's maybe uh, 6.25 inches, so that you can put it in with your triangulations template and do your half square triangle that way. Some patterns, when they are designed, are designed to as much of the fabric as possible with very little waste and very little overage for you. So make sure you do the math before you try to say, "Hey, I want to do triangulations," because there is a chance that the um, the pattern may not have given you fabric to do it that way. The other thing that I've learned is just your triangulations finish size may not be the exact same size as you are accustomed to cutting with your regular ruler. Uh, as you know, with the lines on a roller, there is width to those lines, and depending on where you cut in that line and where your seam allowances are with traditional piecing, it may not fit exactly how you are expecting. So take a little caution when you are putting triangulations pieces up against your traditionally cut piece. You may have to work in a little bit of wiggle room. You may end up having to decide that, oh, maybe I need to use the, you know, 3 and 1/16 size when I'm looking for a 3-inch finished piece. So it's a lot of trial and error. So the first step is to print your triangulations page. If you're doing a whole bunch of pieces, you're going to want to count to see how many you need and divide that by how many triangles you get from a page so you know how many pages you're going to print. Uh, Please don't print the entire PDF. Uh, that is one thing that I've accidentally done a few times, and you end up wasting a lot of paper because you're probably not going to need physical copies of the instructions. You may want them for the first time, but you definitely don't want them future time. And there's a lot of sizes in there. I think it's like 70 or 80 pages. So you don't want to accidentally waste paper doing this. There are instructions in the PDF on how to print because you have to make sure that you print it at 100% scale. I think Adobe by default says to print at like 96% scale or something like that. So depending on your printer, make sure that you print at the right scale. The good thing is the printout tells you how big the lines should be when it shows up out when it gets printed out of your paper, so you can measure before you start cutting to make sure that you have the right size. Right here is my sample grid. This one I have printed at 2-inch finished, so I can get what is that, 12 half square triangles in a single page. Uh, like I said, you can. I think I'm sorry, the quarter or half inch, half square triangles, there's like 30 or 40 on a single page. So there's a lot of stuff on here. Step two is to prepare the grid. Figure out how many half square triangles you're going to need and trim down the size. I'm working on my Saturday sampler block today. So the cutting, it says that I'm going to need to make, what is it, two, four, six half square triangles out of there. So I've cut my triangulations down to a six piece. You get two half square triangles from each square, and I've got three squares here. So that's the size. I end up cutting about somewhere between an eighth and a quarter of an inch outside of the outside lines. If you look carefully, you can see that I have actually cut into the next lines. That's fine because I'm not using those additional. I'm just using the three that are on my piece of paper. Step three is to cut your fabric. What I normally do is I take my triangulations and I cut again just a hair over the fabric size. The advantage that is going on with my Saturday sampler block is they give us a bit of extra fabric in there, so I'm not quite worried about cutting it down. So I have my fabric right here and my triangulations right here, and as you see, I would have plenty of room around all four sides to worry about this. Step four that I do is to prepare my fabric and everything for sewing. You take your two fabrics and you want to put them right sides together, just like you are sewing any other fabric. I think that's one of the things that confuses people with paper piecing is the placement of fabric and how everything should lay. Uh, Triangulations, you are doing this just like your standard piecing. You're just using a piece of paper to line up where you're sewing. Once you got everything together, you want to place your triangulations on top of your paper like this. And as you see, it's moving around on me. You want it to stay. The people who love pinning and are great with pinning, use a couple pins and put them in areas where you will not be sewing. The dotted line is a sewing line, so you want to put any pins pretty much far away from the dotted lines as possible. I'm not a pinner. Uh, there's been a lot of people who will use glue sticks to just temporarily tack down the paper to the fabric. I've seen that used in various things. You just got to make sure you're using the right type of glue stick. I believe there's a sew line glue stick that is really good for that. I use something a little bit different. I use glue dots, specifically this brand and this style. It says they're permanent dots. They're not. Well, at least they're not with the fabric. I use these and I put just a few pieces or like quarter inch or so on the paper. And then I stick the paper onto the fabric and it's just tacky enough to keep everything in place. The two pieces of fabric will tack themselves together and uh, the paper to the glue dots to the fabric is what gets me to keep everything in place for that. So step five is where we're actually going to sew. What you're going to want to do is lower your stitch length to probably about 1.8, maybe 1.6, something that's a bit tighter than what you're accustomed to. The different type of paper that you use is going to change the stitch length that you need. A thicker paper is going to probably need to be closer to maybe even 1.5. The thinner newsprint, you're probably going to be okay with 1.8. Once you get that in there, you're going to want to make sure you have an open toe foot, something that you can see where your needle is going and guiding it. I normally use a quarter-inch foot with a guide with my regular piecing. That's definitely not something. So I'm going to change over and let's get in with some piecing. I'm going to take my machine and I am going to line everything up with the dots. I have a laser on my machine so I can see where everything is going. I'm at a 1.6 stitch length because that's what I'm accustomed to with this level of paper. And we're just going to sew. So on the line, and you can go as fast or as slow as you are accustomed to. You're going to kind of want to follow the arrows. I'm actually not following the arrows, but you're going to want to get over into the dotted lines and rotate as you are getting around. So I am following, and the fact that I have the paper stuck down with the glue dots is causing everything to stay in place. You can go a couple stitches beyond the lines, like I did, especially in the corners, just because you're not going to always end up exactly on a line. Uh, I've done this so much that I know about where I need to stop and go because, like I said, I love using triangulations as my half square triangle method. It does have arrows and everything, so if you follow the arrows, you usually end up starting and stopping in proper points. Like I said, I didn't quite do it right, and I got to do a slight shift in this corner. So I'm just going to adjust this and continue sewing. And then you can see what portions are in your seam allowances and which portions aren't. So right here where I am, I came off the paper or out of the area just outside the seam allowance, but I can adjust my next couple stitches inside the stitch allowance to get back on the dotted line and then continue my sewing. And it will continue in there and get everything to be fully sewn. And then this time I really stopped short. So I will lift my needle, get this lined up again, and continue sewing. And now that I am done, I have all the seams for 6 half square triangles cut in very little time. This is a huge advantage when you're doing larger quantities of half square triangles. If you've seen them do something like, I think, 8 at a time half square triangles, this is similar to what they are doing to that, except you've got the paper template instead of they're trying to imagine what you should be cutting. So this is very handy. Like I said, I did 12 half square triangles to four. I'm sorry, 6 half square triangles. See, I can't. And both sides of it and sewn fairly quickly. Probably could have sewn it about the same time, but the big advantage is in cutting. The next step that you're going to want to do is cut along the lines. And if you, in this case, cut the two big sides and then cut each individual piece out, and at the end, cut down the diagonals, you will quickly cut out a whole bunch of half square triangles. For me, it's a lot faster than doing the traditional method where you're going to have to cut and then sew, then cut down the middle and square up if you need to. It's definitely a lot faster than the strip tube method that I'm doing for another quilt, which is said when I'm future versions of this, I'm done in triangulations mode. So I'm going to go and cut along the lines, and I will be back in a moment. So good news. I remembered that somewhere in the house I had a miniature cutting mat, so I can show you how I do the final trimming of these house square triangles. I have them currently set in the square mode, so the last step is to cut down the center. So I've trimmed everything out into squares, and let's go into trim everything down. You can see the lines in here, and I just line up. You don't have to be as accurate in the center line, and trim it down like that, and go look. Just because I haven't used this mat before, it's not cutting as well. It's also an awkward space, so I will obviously get a better one in the future. And that still didn't work. Wow. This is not saying it's bad for, or that I'm not saying that this mat is bad. I'm just saying that my angle is bad. There we go. I got them all cut apart. And then if you see in the corners, they have where you can trim the dog ears off. I'm not as accurate there. I just trim it by feeling, and you get it down that way. As long as you're just kind of close, you'll have pretty accurate with your dog ears. So once you have that done, switching the camera, you get down to the final steps of this. So the best part is the trimming of the paper, removing of the paper. Some people will bribe their kids or grandkids to remove the paper. I just generally grab an entire pile of them after I cut them, bring them into the living room, put on a movie, TV show, or something, and just start ripping the papers out. To rip the papers, you just pull it off. There's just that little bit of sticky here from the printer, or not from the printer, from the glue dots. I will fold it in half, just to give a crease on the piece on the sew line, and then trying to get this so that you can see it. Just pop the paper at the sew line. Because the machine perforated the paper, it comes off very nicely. And then you just as easily pull off from the other side. I will do another example with the other camera since I have this in place at this moment. As you see now, there's a sew line. I fold it in half just to additionally crease that edge, and then just rip the paper at the perforation and pull off the other side. And when you open it up, you have a perfect half square triangle that you can press to whichever side you need, and then you press it out and put it into your projects. So that's it with triangulations. It seems a little scary at first, but I have loved it since I've started using it. I've used it. I think my big first project with it was Mom's quilt that I made her. I got to use both the half square triangles and the quarter square triangles in there, and it helped make everything come out perfect. And I didn't have to do any extra trimming. A lot of people like to make their half square triangles just a eighth or quarter of an inch bigger and then trim them down. This takes all that extra trimming out of the picture, so you get perfect half square triangles. I hope this video was helpful for a bunch of people. If it was, please give it a like. And if you aren't already, please consider subscribing. It helps let the algorithm know that people love the content that I'm putting out. It doesn't cost you anything, and it just helps me out greatly. So until next time, stay happy and keep stitching.